It is the Big 12 South Pod. Heck, we've discussed three of them already in a certain way, Texas Tech, TCU, and Baylor, but we'll get to football part of it, wins, losses, schedule, and much more. So let's start with TCU. They're in town on Saturday night against Baylor. One of the things that they're pretty good at nationally is defending the pass. Like, they're really highly ranked against defending the pass, like in the top 30 or better in the country. So that'll be interesting because that's what Baylor's been able to do the last couple of games that have led to wins, that then also has opened up the run game. So Sonny Dykes and company, that was a critical win. That's a game, you talk about frustrating if you're Tech, which we'll get to. That game there, they had that game won two or three different times and let it get away. But TCU, Paul, here they are. They're not going to probably play for a Big 12 title by any means, but they are at least dangerous because they can score.
Well, they've poked their head up, out of the ground again after last week. And, I like the Utah game, I still don't know what to think of it. And I probably will never know what to think of it. It's just one of those games, that you would have thought that, TCU with their offense would have scored more than 13. They still won the game. And then here they come last week. They didn't look good early in the game. Will Hammond's come in and he's playing really well. And then, he has a fumble and they, everything kind of turns around for TCU and they win it. I'm very, very curious to see how Savion Williams in the Wildcat works against Baylor this week, now that everybody's seen it. Now that coaches have seen it and are going to try to find a way to defend it. And look, he might be a good enough athlete to where you might be able to contain it, but he might have a couple big plays. But Dave Aranda and the staff have had some time to work that out this week and prep for it, so it's not kind of coming out of nowhere. But we've seen that be effective with Kendall Briles when he had a month, everybody knowing it was going to be that in North Carolina, and they couldn't stop it. So we'll see what happens on Saturday night. I'm impressed by what they've done. I think they've calmed their nerves a little bit, and this is a big one for both teams. And TCU, if they can win this and continue their psychological hold on Baylor, that's going to be huge for them down the stretch.
I mean, Big 12 championship's not entirely out of the question. They've only got 2 losses, so there is still an outside shot, even though it's unlikely that BYU or Iowa State or K-State would all compile enough losses. But if you win this weekend, there's still a shot. And certainly, most of all, there is a guaranteed shot in the postseason. So you can, at worst, get bowl eligible this weekend and beat your rival for the umpteenth time in the last 20 appearances or whatever it is. I don't even know off the top of my head. I've typed it like 10 times this week. It's whatever it is. It's they're 8-1 in the last 9, I think, is what their record is, which is just pretty ridiculous. And there's plenty of reason to believe they could be 9-1 after this weekend. They're very good against the pass. That's where Baylor's done a lot of their damage here recently with big plays. So they're stout against that, one of the best in the country. They're not shabby against the run. I think they've gotten better on defense. And so Baylor's running game having opened up a little bit, like something's going to have to give. And I think whichever way it gives is probably who wins that game. But they're getting better on defense after a really bad start to the season. They're really good in the secondary. They've got really nice weapons on offense, especially at wide receiver. And at quarterback, they're very talented, but Josh Hoover turns the ball over way too much. That's just the case. He is number 1 in the entire country in lost fumbles. He's lost like nearly a fumble a game. Not fumbled it and recovered it, lost a fumble. He's lost more fumbles than any player in the entire country. He's also top 10 in interceptions. So you boil that together, and he is a turnover machine. And when he's not turning it over, he's throwing for 300+ and a couple of TDs, if not more. So very hit or miss is one Josh Hoover at times. And I don't know which version Baylor will see more of. But you can force him into making some mistakes, that's for sure. If he plays a clean game, you love your chances if you're TCU, obviously. But that was a big deal to get that win last week. I think it saves them from an alternate look at the last month where things are not nearly as rosy, and you're wondering about Sonny Dykes, and you're wondering about making a bowl game and all this and that. Now you've got a winnable game in front of you to get to the postseason, get a couple wins in a row against a couple of Texas schools, and feel good again about your direction. And then even hope for some chaos that you can find your way, somehow working your way up the ladder a little bit more before Arlington gets here, even though that's still very much a long shot. But you're in a good spot.
No, they're 3-2, though. They're in a clump with Tech and Cincinnati, and you never know some of those teams. Not everyone's going to play each other, but some of them win. You might get into you can get a list where somebody's undefeated, and a lot of people have 2 losses, right? That could happen. Probably not 7 or 8 teams, but a lot of teams could end up with the 2 losses. Let's get to Texas Tech. They were rolling, and then Baylor went into Lubbock and just did whatever they wanted and countered anytime Tech made a play. And now they're in a 2-game losing streak. And now they have to travel to Ames, Iowa. Not an unbeatable team by any means at Iowa State, but so far nobody else has beaten them.
Well, UCF nearly did 2 weeks ago, so it's not like that's impossible. But
so Texas Tech, Paul.
Well, look, they've got to shake off the controversy we spent 25 minutes talking about in a second and go out there and play. Go win a ball game. That's what they have to do. Now, they're not in a great place to go win a ball game if you're not from there. So, Iowa State's playing really well. I think they run the ball at a clip that's going to be tough for Tech to defend. And I would not be shocked if this game actually isn't close at the end of it, because Iowa State knows how to close. They might go back and forth a little bit, but Iowa State doesn't know how to close. Iowa State knows how to close. Tech does not know how to close, and I think that could maybe lead to some, bigger gap in the score when it comes down to it. So I would not be anywhere near picking Tech in this game. I think they've got too much going on in their heads right now.
Yeah, I would not pick Tech here. I think they'll play hard and play tough and, give it a good shot. So not ruling out the possibilities of an upset, but Iowa State's had 2 weeks to get ready for this game. Whereas Tech's, preoccupied maybe with other things right now. I doubt that bleeds over into the team, but I think Iowa State's had a pretty clear and focused mission for the last several days getting ready for the Red Raiders, and they're at home. And they're just a really good team. So I think they'll give Texas Tech enough problems that they'll, evade any sort of an upset bid. But for Tech, I am interested to see, Baron Morton back after the injury scare. How much do they use Will Hammond? Joey McGuire, I don't think has ruled out the possibility of still seeing Hammond in some spots. So I think that's something that is really at the top of the list of things to check out with Texas Tech, is just the quarterback health and Morton's, and then any potential usage with Will Hammond. As far as the rest of it, we know the deal. Taj Brooks is a really good running back. I also wonder if he's not starting to break down a little bit. And who wouldn't, when you're getting 25 carries every week for, a couple of years? And maybe I'm off on that. Maybe he was just, when I saw him at times here in the last couple of weeks, maybe he's just, nursing something. I don't know. But it seems like he's just slowing down a little bit for it to be noticeable. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that's something to monitor as well, along with the quarterback spot. We know they've got really talented receivers. They're going to be able to score some points, although it will be a very interesting test against an Iowa State defense that can be very good. It's also shown some holes at times. And then on the other side, defensively, they got a lot of issues. So I don't have a lot of faith in them getting the stops necessarily to win this game either. But I think they'll play scrappy, they'll play tough, and I'm very curious about just Morton and Hammond and that whole situation.
It's interesting. Yeah, you're right. It's interesting. I was like, well, if they can get on Iowa State early, they were losing to Baylor 14-3 and didn't blink.
Well, the thing about the TCU game is they were losing the TCU game.
Yeah.
Very early in that one, and then they came back in the middle of that game and turned it into not only a comeback, but then a pretty substantial lead, and then TCU came back again. So TCU was actually winning that game early on. It wasn't as though that was just Tech from the moment the ball kicked off until the very end of that game. It was 14-3 TCU in the first quarter. So it was the second and third quarters where Texas Tech did all of their damage, really. That was 28 of their 34 points came in the second and third quarters. So TCU won the first. They won the middle two. TCU won the last. And not even the last quarter, but the last 5 minutes. And that's where that game turned out. The last 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's like a boxer who started fast, and you remember that immediately because it's the first thing you see. and the other guy starts to wear him out a little bit and maybe wins the mid-rounds, and then you get a knockdown or two late in the fight and you win the decision.
That's a Rocky Balboa.
Yeah, there you go.
That's how all the Rocky movies go. He has a good first round, then the other guy gets mad, beats the crap out of him for like 9 rounds, and they get to the 10th, and then Rocky pulls himself up and knocks somebody out.
And he finds his eyeball, too. He goes and finds his eyeball, and he can see again.
Yeah.
So there we are with Texas Tech. Let's get to Baylor. 1-2 in a row. Have they salvaged their season? No, because there's still 4 games left. But they've given themselves a chance. Something I didn't see happening, honestly. When they were 2-4, I thought this would be another 4 or 5 win. Not another 4 or 5 win, but maybe a 4 or 5 win season at most. The schedule, you can sit there and say it's softened up, but at the same time, in this crazy conference, you never know when somebody rises up from the ashes and plays a heck of a game like they have in the last couple of weeks, and especially the game in Lubbock. And they have TCU right here, Saturday night. We've all been asked to predict the game. A lot of emotions. And we know that TCU has owned this rivalry. There's 4 big wins for Baylor. 11, 13, 14, and, well, I can't remember. Charlie Brewer, and was it 19? That's it, though.
Yeah, the ones that you can actually count on one hand and cite specifically. TCU
I don't
goes,
even
there's a lot of
need
big
one
wins
hand.
for us.
Yeah.
All
like
the rest.
every year but 4.
Yeah, theirs have been really dramatic.
No,
Dramatic.
they haven't. They've won multiple blowouts. They've
Craig,
won
I'm talking
dramatic
about
wins.
Baylor.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Baylor.
Baylor's wins against TCU have been, like, absolutely dramatic, and TCU at times, even when you feel like they're under, like, injury, whatever, they just got them.
One type of Baylor win versus TCU, and it's like an oh, dear God, how did that happen? And there's 2 types of TCU wins. There is a ridiculous blowout where Baylor didn't show up at all, or the Jalen Reagor game that nothing makes, and the Trevon Boykin game.
Yeah.
Those 2 games where nothing makes any sense.
Yep.
Where Baylor is clearly the better team going in. Like everything, if you went down, you have those boxes where it's like special teams, Baylor, every position, Baylor, all the way down the line. And then they play the game and something weird happens like that Jalen Reagor game. TCU made exactly 2 big plays.
Yep.
They were both by him on offense and then played stellar defense and won that game.
Yeah, that was crazy right here. That's the one where I think Matt Rule had to beat Tech the next week to get to a bowl, and that was a team that you thought was going to make the next jump.
So that's some of the history. As far as this game goes, I think that Baylor has been on a really nice run, but TCU is going to present some very unique challenges because they are very good in the secondary. They're getting better just defensively as a whole. I'm curious to see how Sawyer Robertson and the offense has been kind of humming along the last couple of weeks, how they keep that up. I think the biggest stat for this game is turnovers. I think that's going to play a huge role. I know every week sacks and TFLs and turnovers, all the same thing, right? But not really. I think in this game in particular, especially with a quarterback like Hoover and Robertson, who's shown affinity to not throw 2 interceptions and average those a week or whatever, but throws at least 1 bad one every week, it seems like.
Yeah.
Like that to me is the quarterbacks is where I'm looking first and foremost, particularly with the turnovers. I think that's going to decide this game as much as anything else. But can they keep running the ball against a TCU defense that I think is going to be pretty ready for that challenge? And then are they going to be able to throw the ball on TCU, depending on, how they respond to the run? That whole chess match I'm very interested in because the offense has been playing really well. But defensively, I think, you feel good about being able to stop the run. You obviously got to be aware of the Wildcat and Savion Williams and whatever other curveballs they might throw. But those TCU receivers are very talented. That's going to be a huge challenge for a Baylor secondary that got really embarrassed by Brennan Presley last weekend. So there's a couple areas where TCU is really good that you're like, well, that doesn't actually match up all that well. But it's also Baylor TCU. They got a lot rolling in their favor as far as momentum and playing at home and what should actually be a real home crowd that you're supposed to get in college football. I'm expecting that this weekend for the first time this season. So I think that'll push you a little bit. I think Baylor wins this game in a close affair, but it's TCU. So, I mean, you could tell me they win this game by 60, and I would believe it. You could tell me they win by a single point at the very end of the game, and I've actually seen that too, so I would believe that as well.
Yeah, we've seen some drama, and we've also seen, can they just run the clock like a game that's out of control? Then we have Oklahoma State. My God, never thought I'd see the day. Mike Gundy's trying to figure it out, and right now no one can. 5 straight losses. There have been a couple of close games. In fact, lost by 3 to Utah, got blown out by K-State and West Virginia. And I don't know about if it was always that way, but 22 points and also 24. 3 at BYU where they gave the Cougars everything they could handle and gave up a touchdown in the last 20 seconds. And then, of course, Baylor was back and forth, but they lost by 10. I don't know who they are. I don't know who they are. I don't know how it's dropped this much. I know that there's maybe some thoughts about NIL, but they're a mess.
I know how it's dropped that much. They didn't make a commitment to getting younger at quarterback, which they needed to do. They clearly have a talent gap, and if that's NIL, there is, but they're not as talented as they have been in the past. That's very clear. And I think the BYU game was their last effort. I don't think these guys aren't trying hard, and I don't think Mike Gundy's not coaching his ass off, which he always does. I just think that that was their kind of last hurrah. And then last week you saw some things like, look, Brennan Presley had a great game. And what impressed me the most about Brennan Presley was he had 15 catches. It wasn't just long catches. It was short slants, little screens where he would make a move, get yards, fight for yards, do that. So they've got guys that are gutting it out of that team. They're just not deep at all. Especially on defense, they're really bad, and
they've lost some key people on defense,
and they can't rely on their defense to keep them in a game. And so when you are limited at quarterback and your offensive line has underperformed in a way that's ridiculous, there's just no way to win games.
They can't run the ball and they can't stop the run. That's a bad combination.
Yeah, I mean, I think they have some talent, but certainly, your Striblings and your Ollie Gordons and your Presleys and so on, I mean, they can only do so much. You can't run the ball. Ollie Gordon got a couple of short yardage touchdowns last week, but never really popped anything huge that flipped the game or anything along those lines. If anything, the story of his game last week was a couple of short touchdowns, less than 100 yards, and then, 100 back and forth after every play with Baylor defenders. He had as many arguments back and forth as he did rushing yards, and I'm not knocking it. I like Ollie Gordon a lot, but that was what we saw. He was jawing the entire time. And then at the end of the game, there's the clip of him, arguing with the group of players by the tunnel. But it was a frustrating game for him last week, despite the couple of touchdowns. And it's been a frustrating run just overall. I think injuries really doomed them early in the year to some degree. Not to where they should be losing 5 straight Big 12 games, though.
Yeah.
There's no excuse for that. But, yeah, the O-line's not nearly as good as it was expected to be. Alan Bowman, I mean, he is what he is at this point. And the defense is just not good enough to be in Big 12 contention. And those are the issues that have continued to plague them all throughout this season and will probably continue to plague them, although I think this game is winnable. And it's at home. And you're favored, and I think if you don't win this one, then I don't know what to tell Oklahoma State fans because this is an opportunity, although Arizona State is getting their quarterback back, so we'll see. And defending Camp Scatteraboo with what you've done recently on run defense is
scary.
A little bit of a scary proposition.
Arizona State, TCU on the road, Texas Tech at home, and also Colorado to close it out.